I was sitting in that mahogany-paneled conference room on the 42nd floor of downtown's most prestigious law firm, watching my husband Marcus lean back in his leather chair with that smug smile I'd grown to hate over our 3 years of marriage. The lawyer's voice droned on, reading through the will of Marcus's late father, Richard Harrison, a real estate mogul worth $38 million. My hands were trembling as I gripped my black leather purse, knowing what was coming. The office smelled like expensive cologne and old money. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, reminding everyone in that room just how high up the Harrison family stood above the rest of us. Marcus wore his navy blue Armani suit, the one that cost more than I made in 2 months teaching 3rd grade. His gold wedding ring caught the afternoon sunlight as he drummed his fingers on the polished table, waiting for his name to be called. To my son, Marcus William Harrison, I leave the entirety of my business empire, including all properties, investments, and liquid assets, totaling approximately $38 million. The lawyer's monotone voice filled the room like a death sentence. Marcus's chest puffed out like a peacock showing off its feathers. I watched his jaw clench with satisfaction, his blue eyes gleaming with greed. Then came the part that made my stomach drop to the floor. The lawyer continued reading name after name. Marcus's sister Jennifer got $2 million and the art collection. His brother David got the vacation home in the Hamptons worth $1.2 million. Even the housekeeper Maria got $50,000 for her 20 years of loyal service. But my name? Never mentioned. Not once. Not even a token gesture. I watched Marcus's smirk grow wider with each passing second, his satisfaction feeding off my visible discomfort. His sister Jennifer, a Botox-enhanced blonde in her designer dress, shot me a look that said, "I told you so," while his brother David, equally arrogant in his expensive suit, avoided eye contact entirely. The tension in that room was thick enough to cut with a knife. These people had never accepted me, the girl from the wrong side of town who somehow convinced their golden boy to marry her. Marcus reached over and squeezed my hand, but it felt cold, calculated, like a snake coiling around its prey. "Don't worry, honey," he whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "What's mine is yours, right?" But his tone suggested otherwise. The way he said mine, with such emphasis, made it clear that he had never considered me an equal partner in this marriage. That's when I realized this wasn't just about money. This was about power, control, and putting me in my place. I was supposed to be grateful, supposed to smile and nod like a good little wife, while they decided my worth. The humiliation burned in my chest like acid. Have you ever felt completely invisible in a room full of people who should care about you? That's exactly how I felt sitting there, watching my marriage crumble in real time, while lawyers shuffled papers worth more money than most people see in a lifetime. The weeks following that meeting became a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Marcus transformed overnight from the charming man I married into someone I barely recognized. A cold, calculating stranger who seemed to take pleasure in reminding me of my new place in the hierarchy of his life. Our beautiful suburban home in Westchester, which I had helped decorate and maintain for 3 years, suddenly felt like a prison with invisible bars. The cream-colored walls that once felt warm now seemed to close in on me. Marcus hired a financial advisor named Robert Steinberg, who conveniently scheduled meetings when I was at work at Lincoln Elementary School, where I taught 3rd grade. When I confronted him about being excluded, he'd shrug and say, "Why would you need to be there? You don't understand business anyway, Sarah." The way he said my name had changed too. Before it was sweetheart or babe. Now it was just Sarah, spoken with the same tone you'd use for a waitress taking your order. Every conversation became a reminder that I was now living in his house, spending his money, existing at his pleasure. Marcus started treating me like an employee rather than a wife. He'd leave lists of household tasks on the kitchen counter. "Sarah, please pick up my dry cleaning. Sarah, make sure the gardener trims the hedges exactly how I showed you. Sarah, we're having dinner with clients tonight. Wear the blue dress I bought you. The blue dress that made me look like arm candy, instead of a person with her own thoughts and opinions." The humiliation reached new depths when we went to dinner with his family at Le Bernardin, their favorite restaurant where a single meal cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Jennifer made snide comments about how some people marry for love, others for security, while cutting her $100 steak with surgical precision. David would interrupt me mid-sentence to talk business with Marcus, as if I wasn't even there, as if my voice didn't matter. And Marcus? He just laughed along, never once defending me. When Jennifer made a particularly cutting remark about my quaint little teaching job, Marcus actually chuckled and said, "Well, she keeps busy," as if my career was just a hobby to pass the time until he decided what to do with me. But the worst part was how he began treating our shared expenses. Suddenly, my teacher's salary of $42,000 a year wasn't enough for his lifestyle. He started questioning every purchase I made, from the organic groceries I bought to the gas for my 10-year-old Honda Civic. "Maybe you should ask before spending my money," he'd say with that same smirk from the lawyer's office, holding up receipts like evidence of my crimes. I found myself walking on eggshells in my own home, afraid to speak up, afraid to spend money on basic necessities without permission. The woman who used to confidently manage her own finances was now asking permission to buy shampoo. My friends started noticing the change in me during our monthly girls' nights. "Sarah, you seem different," my colleague Emma said during lunch in the teacher's lounge. "It's like you're fading away." She was right. I was disappearing piece by piece, day by day. But what Marcus and his family didn't know was that I had learned to be very, very observant. And patient people often see things that arrogant people miss. The breaking point came 6 months later at Marcus's 30th birthday party, an event that would change everything. He had invited everyone who mattered in his world: his family, his business partners, his college buddies from Harvard, his country club friends, to celebrate at our house. I spent 3 days preparing, cooking his favorite prime rib, making homemade appetizers, decorating the backyard with expensive flowers I charged to his credit card, trying to be the perfect wife he clearly didn't think I was. The party was in full swing by 7 p.m. Our backyard looked like something out of a magazine: string lights twinkling overhead, perfectly arranged flowers, a full bar manned by a professional bartender Marcus had hired. I wore the black cocktail dress he'd picked out for me, the one that made me look like all the other trophy wives in attendance. I was playing the perfect hostess, refilling drinks and making small talk, when I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. Marcus was standing by the pool with his brother David and 2 business partners, drinks in hand, their voices carrying over the sound of jazz music and laughter. They thought they were far enough away from the crowd to speak freely. "So when are you planning to file for divorce?" David asked, his voice casual, as if he were asking about the weather. "Dad's been gone 8 months now. You could probably keep most of it if you move fast, before she gets any ideas about her share." Marcus laughed, and replied, "I'm thinking another 6 months. Let her get comfortable. Let her think this is her new normal. Then boom, she'll be back to her little teacher salary and that crappy apartment she had before we met. The prenup makes sure of that." My heart stopped beating for what felt like an eternity. Prenup? What prenup? We never signed a prenup. I was hiding behind the kitchen window, my whole body shaking as the pieces started falling into place. Marcus had been planning this from the moment his father died, maybe even before. Every cruel comment, every humiliation, every reminder of my place, it was all leading to this moment. One of his business partners chimed in. "Smart move, man. Why split $38 million when you don't have to? Especially with someone who brought nothing to the table." But then David said something that changed everything. "Good thing Dad helped you set up that prenup 2 weeks before the wedding. Sarah probably doesn't even remember signing it with all the wedding stress. She was so scattered, signing vendor contracts left and right." That's when it hit me like a lightning bolt splitting the sky. 2 weeks before our wedding, Marcus had brought me a stack of what he called wedding vendor contracts to sign. I was so overwhelmed with planning, the florist, the caterer, the photographer, the venue, that I just signed everything he put in front of me. I trusted him completely. One of those documents wasn't a vendor contract at all. The conversation continued like a knife twisting in my chest. "The beauty of it," Marcus said, "is that she thinks we're this happy couple. She has no idea what's coming. By the time I file, she'll be so broken down that she won't even fight it." I felt like I was drowning in my own backyard, surrounded by people celebrating while my husband planned to destroy my life. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses became a soundtrack to my betrayal. But as I stood there in my black dress, holding a tray of appetizers I'd spent hours preparing, something shifted inside me. The scared, invisible woman began to disappear, replaced by someone much more dangerous, someone with nothing left to lose. Did you know that sometimes the most devastating betrayals come from the people we trust most? The people who promise to love and protect us? That night, after everyone left, and Marcus passed out drunk on our leather sofa, still wearing his birthday crown like some kind of twisted king, I did something I should have done months ago. I started digging. Not through his business files. I wasn't stupid enough to think he'd leave evidence lying around where I could find it. Instead, I went through his personal email, his text messages, and most importantly, his conversation history with his lawyer, a man named Charles Whitmore, who had been the Harrison family attorney for over 20 years. What I found was worse than I had imagined. Marcus and his family had been planning this divorce strategy since before his father even died. They knew the old man's health was failing after his second heart attack, and they wanted to make sure I couldn't touch any of the inheritance. The prenup wasn't just about protecting assets. It was about ensuring I'd leave the marriage with practically nothing, maybe $10,000 if I was lucky. I found email chains dating back almost a year, discussing the Sarah problem, as if I were some kind of pest to be exterminated. Jennifer had written, "We need to make sure she doesn't get comfortable. The quicker we can get her out, the better." David's response was even worse. "Don't worry, Marcus has this handled. She'll be gone before she knows what hit her." But here's what Marcus didn't know about his simple teacher, wife. I had spent 4 years in college studying not just education, but also business administration. My minor in legal studies suddenly became very useful. I knew exactly what to look for, and more importantly, I knew how to look for it without leaving digital fingerprints. Over the next 3 weeks, I played the part of the obedient, broken wife while secretly building my case. I smiled when he criticized my cooking, nodded when he explained why I couldn't attend important meetings, thanked him when he allowed me to buy new work clothes, all while making copies of everything, emails, text messages, financial documents that Marcus carelessly left on his home office desk. I opened my own bank account at a different bank across town and started documenting every instance of financial control and emotional abuse. I kept a detailed journal, noting dates, times, witnesses to his behavior. I photographed the lists he left me, recorded the conversations where he belittled me in front of others. But my ace in the hole came from an unexpected source. Remember Maria, the housekeeper who got $50,000 in the will? She had been with the Harrison family for 20 years, cleaning their houses, serving their meals, and most importantly, listening to their conversations. When I approached her carefully one afternoon while Marcus was at the office, explaining what I had discovered, her reaction surprised me. "Mrs. Sarah," she said with tears in her eyes, speaking in her soft Dominican accent, "I wondered when you would figure it out. That family, they think they're so smart, but they forget that the help has ears. They forget that we're people too." Maria had been documenting Marcus's behavior for months, worried about what they were doing to me. She had photos of documents left carelessly on tables, recorded conversations on her phone when they spoke about me like I wasn't human, and most importantly, she had witnessed Marcus's father expressing serious doubts about the prenup plan just weeks before he died. "Mr. Richard, he say to me before he die," Maria whispered. "He say, Maria, I think my son is making a mistake with Sarah. She's a good girl. Maybe I should change some things." But then he have the stroke, and it was too late. Slowly, quietly, methodically, I was building something Marcus never expected. A defense. And not just any defense. A counterattack. The divorce papers were served to me on a Tuesday morning in March while I was getting ready for school, my hair still wet from the shower. Marcus handed them to me with that same smirk, expecting me to break down and beg like some pathetic victim in a Lifetime movie. Instead, I looked at him calmly, my hands steady as I flipped through the pages, and said, "I'll call my lawyer." "Your lawyer?" He laughed, the sound echoing off our kitchen walls. "Honey, you can't afford a lawyer. Your teacher's salary barely covers your car payment. And even if you could scrape together some money, that prenup is ironclad. Dad's lawyer wrote it himself." That's when I smiled for the first time in months. A real smile, not the fake one I'd been wearing like a mask. "Actually, Marcus, I think you should read that prenup more carefully. You might be surprised by what you find." The confusion in his eyes was priceless. For the first time since his father's will reading, Marcus looked uncertain. "What are you talking about?" "Nothing," I said sweetly, packing my lunch for school like it was any other day. "I'm sure your lawyer knows what he's doing." 3 days later, we were back in that same mahogany conference room, but this time the atmosphere was very different. My lawyer, Patricia Chen, was one of the best family attorneys in the state. I had hired her with money I'd been secretly saving for 2 years, not because I planned to leave Marcus, but because my grandmother had always told me that a woman should have her own emergency fund. Patricia was a small woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. She had reviewed every document I brought her and discovered something Marcus's overconfident lawyer had missed in his arrogance. The prenup had a fatal flaw. It required full financial disclosure from both parties at the time of signing. Marcus had hidden his knowledge of his father's failing health and the expected inheritance. More importantly, the document had been signed under false pretenses. I was told it was a vendor contract, which constituted fraud. When we walked into that conference room, Marcus was already there with his lawyer, both of them looking smug and confident. Charles Whitmore, the Harrison family attorney, was a man in his 60s with silver hair and an expensive watch who had probably never lost a case involving gold-digging wives. "Mrs. Harrison," Whitmore said condescendingly, "I think we can make this simple for everyone. Your husband is prepared to offer you $50,000 and 6 months to find new housing. Given the circumstances, I think that's quite generous." Patricia didn't even blink. "Mr. Whitmore, I think you should review the prenup agreement more carefully before making any offers." That's when the real show began. Patricia presented evidence of Marcus's systematic financial abuse and his documented plan to manipulate the divorce timeline for maximum personal gain. She had printouts of every cruel email, every text message, every conversation where he treated me like property instead of a person. But the real bombshell came when she played Maria's recorded conversations. The room fell silent as Marcus's voice filled the air. "She'll be back to her little teacher salary and that crappy apartment. The prenup makes sure of that. She has no idea what's coming." I watched the color drain from Marcus's face as his own words condemned him. Jennifer's mouth fell open. David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Even Charles Whitmore looked shocked. "Furthermore," Patricia continued, "we have evidence that Mr. Harrison concealed material information about his financial situation at the time of signing, specifically his knowledge of his father's declining health and the expected inheritance. The prenup is not only invalid due to fraud and non-disclosure, but Mr. Harrison is also liable for punitive damages due to intentional infliction of emotional distress." The settlement negotiation lasted 6 hours. By the time we were done, Marcus looked like he'd aged 10 years. The man who thought he was so clever had been outmaneuvered by the simple teacher he tried to discard. The final settlement? I walked away with 40% of Marcus's inheritance, over $15 million, plus the house worth $2.3 million, plus punitive damages that totaled nearly $2 million more. Marcus had to sell off 3 properties just to pay me, and his precious business empire was reduced to half its size. When I left that conference room for the last time, Marcus looked shell-shocked. His family sat in stunned silence, their plans crumbling around them like a house of cards. The man who had spent months planning my destruction had destroyed himself instead. And you know what the most satisfying part was? I never raised my voice, never lost my composure, never stooped to their level. I just played the long game better than he did. While he was busy being cruel, I was being smart. 6 months later, I opened my own tutoring center for underprivileged kids, something I'd dreamed about for years but never had the resources to pursue. Marcus, meanwhile, had to move back in with his mother while he rebuilt his finances. The last I heard, he was trying to explain to potential business partners why his assets had been cut in half. So tell me, what would you have done in my situation? Do you think Marcus got what he deserved, or was I too harsh? Sometimes the quietest revenge is the most powerful, don't you think? If stories like this keep you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments below what you think should happen to people who try to manipulate and control their partners. I read every single comment, and I love hearing your thoughts on these real-life dramas.